Welcome to Film at 50, a podcast that celebrates semi-centennials in the world of cinema. I'm your host, Brian Rowe, and I'm very thrilled to welcome Cameron Scheetz to the podcast today to talk about Fiddler on the Roof, the highest grossing movie of 1971. How are we doing, Cameron?
I'm great. How are you?
Doing well. Thanks so much for being here to talk about this classic film from 50 years ago. We've been talking about the year in film, 1971, since February. This is the highest grossing movie of the year. What do you think of that? Why is this the biggest blockbuster of 71?
Well, it's clear when you have such a sexy young cast of stars and
I like Topol.
He is very charming, though. I will say, I didn't mean to make that a joke. Like he's a charm factory. That guy. So.
35 years old in this movie, playing a 50-year-old.
Iconic. Yeah, the number one movie, what beating out, I know at least a Bond, you probably have a pretty good sense of what came out that year, but at least a Bond movie, The French Connection.
Yeah.
Like, my God.
Some of the big classic films we think of from that year, like Last Picture Show, French Connection, Diamonds Are Forever, Dirty Harry, Harold and Maude. I mean, some of these movies don't even show up on the top 10. Like the number 2 film of the year is Billy Jack. Like this little indie action kind of movie, which I reviewed earlier.
Time.
It's a weird, we're not quite to Jaws and Star Wars yet. So we're not really to like the IP, to the big genre stuff. Like a movie like Fiddler can pull in audiences big time, especially I'm sure a lot of people were familiar with the stage play, the stage musical and all of that. It had been going for many years. But we've also talked on the podcast before about how like the 3-hour musical was a big staple of the 1960s, right? With movies like Sound of Music. And by the end of the 60s, into the early 70s, some of those aren't performing up to standards, aren't doing so well. So I'm very curious, like to know what was it about Fiddler that kind of broke through that trend and becomes such a huge hit. Kind of interesting. Yeah. So we will get into Fiddler in a moment. Before that, I'd like to just ask you in general, Cameron, like what role has movies played in your life, and give a few favorites you can share with us?
Ooh, the big question. Movies, cinema, the films of my life. Well, I mean, I think I've always been a fan of movies. I think that was just something I loved to do growing up when I was younger. You know, I was one of those kids. My parents would sit me in front of a TV and I'd, watch something and just be totally enthralled. I think there's maybe 2 things that really intensified my film fandom that I would pinpoint. The first one being seeing, this is going to sound wild at first, but maybe not, seeing Austin Powers when it came out on home video. Okay. So when was that? Well,
1997.
Yeah, so maybe I saw it a little bit later, 99 or something. I would have been like 12, 13, maybe just old enough to see it. I thought it was so funny. And I also was like, there's a lot in here that I don't understand. Like these references I don't get. Obviously like sexual innuendo that was like way over my head, but references to the Bond movies. And that really stoked my curiosity. So Austin Powers was my gateway drug into Bond at a really young age. And then Bond, obviously with those films dating back to 64 was kind of this gateway drug into just the history of film.
Yeah.
So, God, and I love those movies. I love the Bond movies.
Oh my gosh! Did you like the new? Did you like the new one, No Time to Die?
I'm a fan. I think I'm a little warmer on it than like. At least like the AV Club's film critic was kind of so. I feel like reviews have been mixed. I think it's a great cap for Daniel Craig's run. Like he's been incredible, and I think what he's done with the role has been incredible. But I wanted it to be a little more fun. I love like the
that has been a big problem with the Daniel Craig. They're not very fun, right? I mean, I would say Skyfall like had the most like humor in certain part. Like the newest one, I thought was like the best kind of closer for a James Bond actor. But yeah, it's very serious, and at the end, it's so emotional. You're like, oh my God, is this even a Bond film?
It almost doesn't feel like it. Someone else had mentioned that like it's funny that no other Bond has gotten that sort of closure for their run. Like the last scene of a Roger Moore Bond movie was like, him making some quip while he gets some woman in bed, and
same with Brosnan. Yeah.
Yes,
yeah. They don't really have, and then Sean Connery, we're going to talk about his final official Bond movie, Diamonds Are Forever. That came out in December of 71. But then he played the role one more time in 83 in Never Say Never Again, which is like this unofficial Bond movie that's not part of the canon. And that's not a very good film. And it's like a weird, like, final entry. I don't know. So he did not
accept it.
I've talked about this once before. Like, he considered doing On Her Majesty's Secret Service, which ended up going to George Lazenby. But then, but he was so sick of the role, Connery was like, no, I'm out. And On Her Majesty's Secret Service is such a great movie. I'm like, what if that had been Connery's final Bond? That would have been just epic. Would have been amazing.
God, absolutely.
So it's kind of unfortunate how it worked out. but his career was great. He'll he's fine. His legacy is intact.
He did okay for himself. Not to fully derail into Bond, but clearly you can see, like, this was a big thing for me at even at a young age. Like that really did open a lot of doors in terms of just what I was interested in. And
Austin Powers got you there. I love that. Which those movies, I'll still rewatch those every once in a while and like get a lot of laughs out of it. Yeah, I saw Austin Powers, the first movie. It came to theaters, and I remember I saw it with a friend in like an empty theater opening weekend. Like, nobody knew what that movie was, and I talked about it with friends for weeks. And they're like, what are you talking about? Austin Powers, what is this? People didn't really get it until it hit home video. And then they started renting it, and then it became huge after home video. But in the beginning, people were like, what is this?
That's true. It was more of a home video. Thank God. That's funny.
Yeah. Well, and then the sequel was huge. The 2 years later.
Right.
Yeah.
So home video is kind of the segue into like the other thing that is important in my like film appreciation.
Yeah.
Well, basically a job in high school of mine was working at a video rental store.
Oh, cool.
Not Blockbuster, more of like a regional equivalent. I don't know if, depending on where listeners are from, maybe they would know Family Video.
Okay.
But it was like fully a Midwestern chain. I worked there, and, not only was I trying to stay on top of all the new releases that would come out so that I could like talk to people about them who would come in. Yeah. I just have this full library, like literally right in front of me, in a way that I think is so much easier to like find something interests you than like obviously scrolling through Netflix. I could scroll through Netflix for hours and just be like, what? I don't know what to do. But like when you have it physically in front of you,
you had to commit.
Yeah, you did.
Back then.
And yeah, that's true. You had to commit. And sure, more often than not, especially, once everything was on DVD, you would take it home and there'd be like a scratch on the DVD or something. Just part of that life. At least at my little regional video rental chain that was kind of janky at times. But man, that was really important for me. And I think that is just where like my true just love of movies came from.
I feel sad for the younger generation now who will never have that experience of going into a video store. Like that was just so, I mean, even if you weren't like a huge movie buff, like it was just such a fun thing to do on a Friday night and just walk around, talk about films and look at all the different genres and take a chance on something. And yeah, as you say, when you go on Netflix now, you have some of that experience, but you have the possibility of starting something, watching it for 10 minutes and being like, no, next. Whereas when you rented something, you brought it home, like you had more incentive to watch the whole thing. So, so I do feel like that is missing for the younger generation now.
You talking about younger generation, I'm just reminded, it's something I hadn't thought about in a minute, especially over the summer. There were like parents that would like, I swear, drop their kids off and then go run other errands and come back like an hour later and be like, did you find something yet? And it was like, we were also babysitters in a way too, but anyway.
So do you have any like all-time favorite movies or like a favorite genre? Like what are like, is Austin Powers one of your favorites, or that was just like a way?
I mean, maybe so. No, I mean, the Bond movies really are up there for me, that in general. I've always kind of loved that sort of spy narrative, but with like, my favorite ones always have that sense of fun to it, a little bit of camp factor.
Right.
I think along those lines, maybe even more than any individual Bond movie, one of my all-time favorite movies is Charade, which I kind of came to.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Guess through Bond, because I knew it was sort of this like thriller, this like international. But God, that movie's got romance, it's funny, like that has everything I could want in a film. So that is up there for me.
Cary Grant and Audrey Hepburn, the most Hitchcockian film Hitchcock did not make.
Right.
Like, I feel like if you're looking through 60s movies and you've looked at a few Hitchcock films and you put on Charade, you're going to assume it was directed by Alfred Hitchcock. It's not.
Oh yeah,
it's got that North by Northwest kind of feel to it.
100%.
Just 4 years later in 63. It's a great film.
Oh God, yeah. So that's up there. I think around the time where I was like in high school working at the video rental store, I fell like head over heels in love with Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, and that has always stuck with me. Just I mean, that to me is like shows the full scope of what you can do on film that you couldn't do with anything else. Just the way that they kind of cycle through these memories and things are, you know, there's like even just these practical effects, you know, the way that Michel Gondry will work these practical effects into things. I love his imagination, and I love how his imagination is applied there to, again, this romance. I think the end of it is so hopeful. In a really kind of dark way still, but like I'm obsessed with him.
I'm a huge Jim Carrey fan. He was my hero when I was young, like Ace Ventura, Dumb and Dumber, that era. I mean, he was just my hero. And to see him go into dramas was really cool. Like to see him do Truman Show and Man on the Moon, and then Eternal Sunshine, like him paired with Kate Winslet, also one of my favorites. It seems like it wouldn't work, but they are so good together. I love that their pairing in that, and it's such a unique, innovative movie that holds up. Gosh, coming up on 20 years here fairly soon, and it still holds up. It's so great. I love that movie.
Yeah,
very cool.
And then the other big thing, you know, in my fandom that I'd probably point out is just that I've always loved the Coen brothers, and I think that I think that I probably came to Fargo pretty early on. Not long after the Bond movies. And obviously that's like, you know, there's some darkness to that. Like I was maybe a little young to be watching it when I did, but I thought it was brilliant. And I was just like, who is this woman? You know, Frances McDormand. But at the time I was just like, where did she come from? I had no idea at the time, but I was just like, she is brilliant. This is the best performance I've ever seen. So that stands out to me. And then more recently, I honestly, Inside Llewyn Davis is like maybe a top 10 film for me. I just think that's gorgeous.
That's a great movie too. Yeah, Coen brothers are fantastic. I saw Fargo because of the Siskel and Ebert. I was really into watching their show in the mid 90s.
Oh, cool.
And they spent a year in 96 saying this is the best film of the year. So I finally had to go check it out. I think I rented it. But yeah, it's such a unique, weird movie. It's like it's definitely not a movie that was appropriate for 11-year-old me at the time.
Right.
But I still enjoyed it. And been watching their career evolve the way it has. I mean, going to films like No Country for Old Men, which is so different in tone from like a Fargo. And there's some of their comedic work, and you know, they always bring something interesting to every movie they do. And I'm excited. It's just one of the brothers, right? I'm excited for the Macbeth adaptation. Have you seen that yet? The Macbeth adaptation. It's coming soon. I'm excited. Yeah. Denzel and Francis.
I know, right?
Favorite. That's my favorite Shakespeare play is Macbeth. So I'm excited.
Oh God, yeah, it's a great one.
Yeah,
I'm thrilled. I can't wait. It looks gorgeous. So
those are great choices. Fantastic.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I also want to, before we get to Fiddler, I also want to ask you. You've been working at the AV Club. Kind of, what is your role there? And tell me what it's like to interview all of these amazing actors that you've had the opportunity to talk to.
I mean, it's a dream come true. It really is. I've been so the AV Club is part of the Onion. So Onion Inc. is the parent company. I've been with Onion Inc. for 7.5-ish years now, which is wild to me. But that was one of my first full-time jobs. I was the office admin at the Onion offices in Chicago. Okay. Working the front desk, kind of managing things, answering the phone. This was still kind of the time where we would get a lot of calls from people that would be confused about the Onion headlines. Like they wouldn't know that it was satire, and they'd call in and be like, what is going on? And I was like, how did you I always wanted to know how people would manage to find the phone number on the website and still like things wouldn't click. It's not like the phone number is like flashing on the front page of the Onion. They had to dig, and yet they didn't really like. Anyway,
they're calling. They're like, when is the meteor going to hit today? Like, I don't understand. Like, no,
yeah, exactly.
No, that was satire.
Oh God, yeah, we got some angry calls too. A lot of fun stories there. But yeah, so I was there and kind of got to know everyone in that office in a really fun, exciting way, because you know, you do have the Onion writers, you have the AV Club writers and I'd been reading the AV Club for years at that point. You've got people on the sales team. There was just a lot of different types of teams of people there, which was cool. And I kind of got to know all of them in a special way. And so that when a job opened on the social media team specifically for the AV Club, I applied to that because my background was kind of in advertising marketing. I went to journalism school, but with like a track in that area. And so I got that job and I was doing social for them. And, you kind of become accustomed to the voice just doing social. And then there were times where I'd get to contribute to an article here and there. So I did another job in between, just kind of development wise, but eventually I came out to LA to help us put our best foot forward in terms of like video efforts, because more often than not we would get these offers to come interview people, junkets, that sort of stuff, but that was all out here, obviously for me now that it's just all been virtual. But
you're settled in LA for the pandemic to hit. You're like, wait, what?
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I've been out in LA for 3 years and some change, and so most of that has been pandemic. The bulk of that majority. Yeah, but it's been great, and obviously like getting to talk to these people is a dream come true. I never thought that would be something I would get to do. I think that back in my mind it was always something I was really like, well, that'd be amazing, but not me. What's it like? What is it like beyond just like the most surreal experience in the world? I think, I was chatting with you earlier. It's just like, you always kind of have to toe the line of just going in there and like fully geeking out, but then also trying to like, put an actual interview together. Right. It's never not like an exciting thing for me as such a fan of movies and the work these people do. It's just like, melts your mind a little bit. I will never forget. I think that I've gotten to a point where I'm okay and I don't really come off as super nervous, but I remember walking into a room with Charlize Theron and being like, "This is the most beautiful person I've ever seen. She's such a talented actor. Like, my God." So yeah.
That was in person with Charlize? That was in person?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. And you have like 5-10 minutes and you have to, like, as you say, find that balance of being a fan, but also you have a film that she's there to promote. So you have to kind of find that balance, right?
Yeah, the bread and butter of what we do are these video junkets. And, when it was in person, it was just, you are literally pushed into a hotel room for 4 minutes and the timer starts the minute you cross the threshold, and then
there's an actual timer
down the whole time. Yeah, absolutely.
Like at the Oscars, like there's like a countdown.
Yeah. I'm like, gotta wrap up my speech. Yeah. So it is a weird, it's its own weird thing. Like, I've been lucky to be able to do more long form interviews too, kind of outside of that beat, but like the junket style interview is its own beast. And especially when you're trying to ask something unique that maybe not everyone else is asking, there's a lot of thought that has to go into how you're going to approach these 4 minutes, because you want to ease your way into it, but you don't want to just start with this like heavy hitting question. But yeah, so the only way I've been able to get comfortable doing that is just doing it more and more and more. So
is it easier to do it on Zoom or harder, or is it like the same?
It is, in the sense that like I'm in sweatpants, you know what I mean?
You don't have to get dressed up.
and I'll, like, to be honest, when you go into these, sometimes you'll write notes down on cards when you're doing it in person, but when I'm doing it on Zoom, I have like an iPad set up with my questions right next to me.
Oh, right.
It becomes a lot easier to feel like you're just glancing over at that than it does to be like, let me read my card here.
To nod and then look down for a moment, just, and you go like this. It's, okay, I have my next one. Right? Yeah.
That's exactly, yeah. So it has made it easier, and I'm curious how I'll feel going back into the world, but I think I have become more confident in my own ability to do these sorts of interviews in the time that we've been.
You are fantastic. I watched the one you did with Nicolas Cage. I mean, you were really great.
Oh, thank you. I mean,
I would be a blubbering mess.
Yeah.
I love all your movies.
Blast.
That'd be me.
Always hard to not do that, definitely.
Like when you have an actor who has like a career that spans 40 plus years, I mean, that's like, that would be tough for me to just be like, okay, let's focus on your film you're here for today. I'd be like, all right, I have a list of questions.
Yep.
Oh wait, no, I only have a few minutes. You just have to, you have to do, but just the opportunity to talk to some of these people.
Of course.
Haven't you put it on your Twitter? Don't you have Margot Martindale on there? Like you did
that was
interview.
That honestly, what I will tell people is my favorite one I've ever done, because that was early, like pandemic, early quarantine. and I was supposed to have like 45 minutes with her, which is already a lot.
Oh,
and the
cool.
time we were getting towards the end of things, and I was like, I want to ask you about a few other things, but I know we're almost out of time. And she's like, well, she does this thing where she like jokingly yells off camera, "Do I have anywhere to be?" She's like, "No, I don't have anywhere to be. Like, let's just talk. I don't care." And I was like, wow, I can't wait to I want to one day get a drink with you. Like, I would love to just hang. She was such a fun chat. Like, oh,
what bestie. A thrill to be able to have that much time with someone like Margot Martindale. Yeah. I had a chance recently for the podcast interview the casting director of the First Wives Club, Eileen Starger, who's amazing. She gave me almost 4 hours.
Wow.
We talked about her entire career going back to the 1980s. I cut it down a little bit for the podcast episode, but she gave me so much time, and she talked about like so much about First Wives Club and other films she did, like That's 2 Weeks Notice and School of Rock. And when they give you that time to really explore, you can really have a deep conversation about the film industry and about entertainment and film history. It's just so it's so enriching when you have that opportunity. It's harder to do that when you have 4 minutes.
Yeah, absolutely.
So much in,
Oh God, yeah, that sounds like a dream. And so like casting director, I mean, gosh, I'm sure she had some stories.
Oh my gosh, casting directors have a lot of great stories. Let me tell you, some things she said didn't make it to the episode, like some interesting stuff. All right, Cameron, so let's get to our movie today, Fiddler on the Roof. Brief, 3 hours long, which was news to both of us.
Yeah.
A year ago, I picked this David Lean movie to do for an episode called Ryan's Daughter. And it's this like quiet love story. And it's 3.5 hours long.
Wow.
And my guest the night before like texted me, he's like, it's 3.5 hours, Brian. I'm like, I'm sorry, please watch it. So thank you for watching this 3-hour movie for me today. So we're going to get into our thoughts on it in a moment. I wanted to just give just a brief little summary here from IMDb. For those of you who might not have seen it, I had never seen this movie before.
Blind spot for me
too. You had not seen like I was like vaguely aware. I knew of its title. I knew of like if you're watching this, the image behind me. I'd seen that.
Yep. I knew that too.
And I knew that John Williams played a role in the movie. Like I knew that, but like the story and everything was kind of new. I wasn't quite sure before going into this. So in pre-revolutionary Russia, a Jewish peasant with traditional values contends with marrying off 3 of his daughters with modern romantic ideals, while growing anti-Semitic sentiment threatens his village. The star of the film, his name is Topol. He was not like the guy who originated the role on stage of Tevye.
Right.
It was Zero Mostel. He was like thought to be, he was going to be in the movie, but the director, Norman Jewison, decided to go with someone who had not quite as much of a larger than life personality. So he cast like a younger actor in Topol.
That's almost like them doing Funny Girl and not casting Leah Michele, No.
Right, but this is going back. I mean, the most famous is probably Julie Andrews not being cast in the My Fair Lady movie.
Sure, yeah.
Which allowed her to do Mary Poppins, and then she won an Academy Award for Mary Poppins.
Yep. She got her revenge.
Jessica Tandy for Streetcar Named Desire. The whole cast from the show was put in the movie except for Jessica Tandy. They cast Vivian Lee from Gone with the Wind instead, and she's great in the movie. But that would I feel like that might be hard, right? If you're like a part of the cast.
That's really interesting.
And they cast everyone else.
They had to feel weird, right?
You're like going to see the movie. You're like, I don't know if I want to watch this. But most of them went on, like Julie Andrews didn't get My Fair Lady the movie, but then she's had just an extraordinary career. I mean, most of these people, when they're really talented, like they'll get there. They'll be fun. And I can't say Topol is an actor that I've seen in a lot of stuff. This was kind of my introduction to him. He got an Oscar nomination for this movie. And he came on board not for the show but for the movie, but he would play the role on stage for many decades after this, like in touring productions. Like he played the role for many decades, which is kind of cool. Like he didn't just do the movie and that was it.
He finally became the age that Tevye is supposed to be instead of being a 36-year-old playing.
Has to wait. It's like I'm doing film at 50 and I'm in my mid 30s. Like I have to like wait to get like when I'm actually 50. That'll be weird.
Right.
It's like far in the future. All right, so a few more things about the movie that I found interesting. The title comes from a painting by Russian artist Marc Chagall called The Dead Man, which depicts a funeral scene and shows a man playing a violin on a rooftop. That's where the title comes from. So I don't know if that image is why this exists.
I guess so, maybe. I mean, that's really cool to just see a painting and be like, I've got a whole film that this is in my head now. That's really cool. So I didn't know that. I know of the artist Marc Chagall. Like, I know I've seen some of his work, but did not realize that. That's cool.
Yeah, so thankfully there's that painting, or else this might not exist. I don't know.
Yeah.
Principal photography was done at Pinewood Studios, which is where they shot a lot of Bond films, right?
Sure is. Bond's home. Yep.
Isn't that a studio that's like burnt down a number of times?
I feel
like I read at least one of the Bond movies, like they had to push back production because the studio burnt down. I want to say I read that once about one of the many Bond films. Most of the exteriors were done in Yugoslavia. So I guess some of the interior stuff was done on stage, like that amazing dream sequence, like that.
Oh my God!
Scene, that looked like it was done on a stage. So that's probably it. Yeah,
right.
But then some of the exteriors, obviously, it looks like they're really there. So that I think those are
beautiful.
Yugoslavia, really beautiful location photography. Let's see. The first time the movie was shown on U.S. television, it garnered 40 million viewers.
Oh my God!
Can you imagine like something dropping today and it gets 40 million viewers?
Wow, what has even come close lately?
That kind of communal event on the TV will never happen again, right?
No.
Like that kind of event where we all get in front of the TV. It's just like there's just so many different avenues of getting your entertainment now. It's hard to like find one thing. To get us all to watch something at the same time. I mean, I guess you have like award ceremonies and stuff. I mean, those still do okay, but like there's nothing like, you know, the Super Bowl and some of these things, but there's nothing that I think will ever bring together that many people at once.
No, I mean, every once in a while you feel like everyone, at least that's online and tweeting about it, is watching like Mayor of Easttown or something. You know, by the time the finale comes around, everyone's watching. Like, I feel like we're gonna get that with Succession. You know, it's gonna seem like everyone's tweeting about it, but that's not 40 million people. You know, that's still
and even those shows like Mayor of Easttown, where everyone's into it and watching it, most of us are watching it at different times, right? Like some people are watching it when it airs. I would usually watch it like later that day or the next. You know, it's not like necessarily you have to watch it the minute it comes out. So that's also a thing too. So let's see. Fiddler on the Roof was theatrically released on November 3rd, 1971. So right after Halloween, we get Fiddler, which has like that Halloweenish sequence in the middle of the movie, which I found interesting.
Spooky.
The film grossed $83 million worldwide on a $9 million budget, becoming the highest grossing movie of 1971. $83 million in 1971. That's huge. That's really big.
Huge.
Yeah.
If I were a rich man, that came true. It came true.
So that, as I said before at the beginning, like this was the highest grossing movie of the year. The film also did really well at the Academy Awards. It was nominated for 8 Oscars, including Best Picture, Best Director for Norman Jewison, Best Actor for Topol, and Best Supporting Actor for Leonard Frey. It won 3. It won Cinematography for Oswald Morris, Best Sound, and Best Music, Scoring, Adaptation, and Original Song Score. That's a mouthful.
Yeah.
For John Williams, when we think of John Williams, we think of Spielberg, we think of Star Wars. I think if you were to quiz even like casual moviegoers, like, okay, John Williams has been nominated a gazillion times. What are the 5 films he won an Academy Award for? I bet you very, very few would guess Fiddler on the Roof.
Well, I wouldn't have even thought of it just because, like, where do the rules...
Right.
I mean, now, especially, what are the rules on this? Like, if he's pulling from the music of the musical itself, I mean, right? Because some of the score does pull that into it.
Right. So I'm assuming he created some things for this movie, right? It wasn't just pulling from the stage show, but like scoring adaptation kind of sounds to me like he's taking score that was done before and kind of doing something maybe a little different with, I don't know. It's not like the other 4 Oscars he won for where he created everything from scratch.
Right.
So, and then it says original song score. So I'm assuming he wrote some new themes for the movie.
Oh,
hopefully.
Interesting. This was his first win, right? I think so.
This was his first win. I want to say he was nominated once or twice before this.
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't work with Spielberg until 1974 on the Sugarland Express.
Wow.
I want to say Spielberg had recognized Williams' work in like a late 60s film he did. I think it was called The Reavers, if I remember that story correctly. It wasn't this movie. But then he started working with Spielberg, and then they collaborated on almost everything together, Spielberg's whole career. And then obviously got in with George Lucas for Star Wars. So his first Oscar is for Fiddler on the Roof. Do you know what the other ones he won for?
Oh no.
The quiz.
I mean, I think that he won for Jaws.
He won for Jaws, which is his most like simplistic score of all time, right. And it's just like, brilliant. It's like Donna, two notes, Donna. Have you heard that story about Spielberg where Spielberg had John Williams come over to Spielberg's place or whatever, and Williams like, okay, I'm gonna play you the score for Jaws, ready? And Spielberg said, okay, and then he went Donna, Donna, and Spielberg thought it was a joke. He was like,
yeah. Oh God, that's funny.
And then it's the Academy Award winner for Best Score of the Year. So great. So yeah, so you won for Fiddler, one for Jaws. What do you think the other ones were?
I mean, Star Wars.
Star Wars, got it. Which would have been pretty. I don't know what else was up that year in '77. I mean, I don't know what could have beaten the Star Wars score. It's just it's phenomenal. Yeah.
And then
you're like, wait, I didn't think I was gonna have a test on this.
Yeah, wow. Oh, trivia. I mean, this is stuff I love knowing, and it bums me out that I don't. Maybe Close Encounters.
Ooh, that's a good guess. So that was also the year of Star Wars. So I don't know if he was nominated for. I mean, Close Encounters doesn't really have much of a score, does it? I mean, it's mostly like that music at the end.
I just thought of that. And I was like, well, that's iconic too. So,
yeah. So what's like? So the next one was Spielberg's like early '80s massive hit. It's not Raiders, which I feel like he should have won for an Indiana Jones movie, but it was the other big one.
That's another good theme.
The one with the alien.
oh, E.T. Okay.
Yeah, so he won for E.T., which is a beautiful score. That is really nice, last 15 minutes of that movie, like if you watch it without the music, it's fine. His score is so incredible at the end of E.T. And then the last one is also for Spielberg, the year of 1993. He did not win for Jurassic Park, which is one of my favorite John Williams scores. So I love that score. But what was his other film that year? Do you know the other?
Schindler's List.
Schindler's List.
Yeah. Man, they were busy.
An amazing score. Yeah. I do not know, Cameron, how Steven Spielberg had Jurassic Park and Schindler's List in the same year. Two just wildly different movies in every way.
Yep.
And they're the same year.
Wasn't it that he there was something where maybe he was editing Schindler's List and it was so dark and depressing, such an intense process that he was writing Jurassic Park kind of to break it up or something along those lines.
So so Jurassic Park was first. He was like shooting Schindler's List and he would work all day and then he'd go to like a little room and talk to like the editors and visual effects artists of Jurassic Park. It'd just be he said it was very strange. It would just be like he's making this very specific kind of film, very dark film. And then he'd go like, all right, so Steven, can we get the thumbs up on this design of this Triceratops or something? He's like, okay. But yeah, I think I remember I heard a story like he would have Robin Williams call him when he was overseas, when he was shooting Schindler's. He would have Robin Williams call and make jokes because he needed to laugh. He needed some catharsis because it was such a difficult film to make. But then I remember reading that, or was on one of the documentaries, that John Williams, he watched Schindler's List without the music and it touched him so much emotionally. He said, you need to get someone better to score this movie.
Wow.
Like I'm not up to snuff with it. And Spielberg said, yeah, but all the other ones are dead. So you need to do it, John. And John paced. He was like, oh my God, what do I bring to this incredible movie? And you just listen to that main theme. It's just some of his best work. Yeah. So yeah, I wouldn't put his score in Fiddler on the Roof kind of up to the standard of his other four Oscar wins. Damn, I don't know if you walk out of this movie and you're like, wow, John Williams.
Well, that's where I'm just confused on where is the line. I think there's undeniably catchy melodies in here, but were those, how are you adapting the score? I actually would love to know more about how that process worked then. I have no idea.
Yeah. There's a documentary on the Blu-ray. I watched it on its 40th anniversary edition Blu-ray, and it had it was very short, about John Williams talking about his work. And he talked a little bit about adapting it. And he said it was a lot more work than he thought it would be. It wasn't just like, I'm just going to pull music and right. get an orchestra together. Like he had to do a lot of work on it. And no, it was not like an easy job by any means. He had a lot to do on this one. And this is, again, very early in his career. My last piece of trivia about the movie was on May 28th, 2020. It was announced that MGM and producers Dan Jinks and Aaron Harnick will remake Fiddler on the Roof, with Thomas Kail, known for his work on Hamilton and Grease Live, directing, and Dear Evan Hansen writer Stephen Levinson penning the scripts. So that was announced about a year and a half ago. I don't know if there's been any movement on that. Have you heard anything about that? That was news to me.
Well,
I was like, what?
Yes, I have, in the sense that, strangely enough, Dan Jinks is a friend in real life.
Oh!
And
there you go.
I know, yeah. And, I try not to pry and ask too much about his in development stuff, but I know that they're still working on it.
They're working on it. Oh, cool. Okay.
I knowing him and knowing that was going to happen, I think that's super fascinating. I've been like really trying to figure out who, like, maybe I'll pose this to you, like, who would you cast as Tevye if we're remaking?
Who would I cast as Tevye
now? Yeah.
Well, let's see. So a 35-year-old played him at 50. So
yeah.
So let's go with someone even younger, right?
Right.
Tom Holland.
Okay, that's it. Tom, yes.
He would bring in the audience.
He sure would.
He doesn't have to dress up as Spider-Man.
Well, no. I mean, I think people will come no matter what. They'll show up for Tom. Yeah. Just given the fact that he tends to show up in every movie musical these days. I mean, James Corden sitting right there.
Right.
No, no, thank you. I will.
You know what? I actually think that could happen. He's kind of this jovial, like. Yeah. I can picture it like happening.
I cannot imagine they would make this and not cast an actual Jewish person in the role.
Yeah.
And that someone that came to mind immediately, and this, not to give away something I'll talk about a little bit later on, is Michael Stuhlbarg. And I don't know if he can sing.
From A Serious Man, right?
Yes, and I want to talk about that later.
Coen Brothers.
We'll get into later on, but
that might come up later.
Yeah, I mean, he is in his 50s. There are certain reasons. I mean, I just think he's an incredible performer. I don't know if he could like sing enough to carry a tune to do this, but he came to mind. But then I also had a couple wild cards come to mind. One of them, if they we'll see how they shape this movie, but they could go with Seth Rogen. Like.
I can see it.
I think that they could do it. He's what, 30? He's in his late 30s. Like, so he's probably around the same age Topol was.
Okay.
It's like if Seth wanted to really be like, this is going to be my like serious awards play. Not that this is.
Yeah, and he's done some serious work, like in Steve Jobs, the movie.
That's
Steve
right.
Jobs.
That's right.
He's in the new Steven Spielberg drama that he's shooting right now with Michelle Williams.
Oh my God.
It's like based on Steven Spielberg's life when he was younger, and I think Seth Rogen is playing the dad. Michelle Williams playing the mom.
That. Well, then there you go. It's just they're gonna see his performance in that and be like, okay, then this is the right guy.
And they worked on another movie together by Sarah Polley. This title's escaping me, like 7-8 years ago.
That movie is so good.
They did a drama together too. Yeah.
Why am I blanking on that?
What was that movie called?
I love it. It's one of my favorites.
It's a good film. Yeah, it's so good. It must have been like one of those titles. It's just not quite. Doesn't stick. It's a good film.
It was kind of a. I'm gonna look it up right now since I'm sitting at the computer because it's gonna kill me. If we don't find it. Stories We Tell. No,
Stories We Tell was the documentary.
No, that's the doc, which is also incredible.
What was the
Take This Waltz?
Take This Waltz.
Yes.
I would have never thought of that. If I had been sitting there for 12 more hours, it never would have come in.
Incredible. It's such a good movie. Oh, yeah. No.
So, yeah, Seth Rogen and Michelle Williams are in that. And then they're also in the new Spielberg project coming in 2022, which I'm excited to see.
Yeah. But I honestly, I think he's a great actor. And I think that he could be good for this. I don't know, like, can he serviceably sing for the part? Maybe. But, like, watching this for the first time.
Tricky.
Yeah, that's true. But watching this for the first time, I was like there is a lot of humor in this film and what Topol brings to the role. So I could see Seth doing something comparable to that, certainly.
Yeah. Has he ever sung in a movie?
I don't know.
I can't think of it. I can't think of a movie where he had to sing.
But I'm so curious about,
sometimes actors, they don't show you everything they have until that opportunity comes along. I mean, you never know.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
That's true. He could surprise us.
So maybe that would be, we talk, usually towards the end, we say, like, if this movie were to be made 50 years later, because cinema has changed so much over the last, 5 decades, like, how would it be different? And since we're kind of on that now, like, I mean, thinking about how like, watching this movie this past week, made and shot in like 1970, early 71, like, how do you think that they would change Fiddler on the Roof today? I mean, it couldn't be 3 hours today, could it? You think like a theatrical film? Like maybe if they made it for Netflix or something, but if they made it for theaters, I feel like it would have to be no more than like 2 hours 15, maybe.
I was gonna say that's something that's so fascinating to me about this, and as you say, kind of films like of the era immediately preceding it, just like we're adapting these musicals, and we weren't really. I think now it's almost a given that if you're adapting a musical to a film, you're going to lose certain scenes, maybe a subplot. You're going to lose a few songs. I know I read that a few songs were not used in the movie Fiddler on the Roof that were in the musical, but
yeah, there's a delete on the Blu-ray. There's a deleted song like in the bonus features that they shot for the movie and they cut.
Yeah,
I think they were like 3 hours, guys.
I think they would. I think they would trim it down, and I guess we haven't really talked about like broader, just general thoughts on the film yet either. Yeah. But I was, as I joked with you, it's like I was excited to see this blind spot, correct this blind spot of mine, and then I was like, oh my god, 3 hours. But I started watching it and I was like, oh, this thing moves. This is a lot of fun. I think there was more humor in it than I was expecting.
It is funnier than you think it's going to be.
Totally. A lot of the songs are great, especially early on. Of course, everyone is at least familiar with If I Were a Rich Man because of the Gwen Stefani song. Yeah. That was kind of my only knowledge of this so far. But like the Matchmaker song I had heard before, Tradition, kind of the I had heard that before too.
Yeah, Tradition.
But anyway, that is all I say. Like, I think at least for the first half, this thing feels zippy and very, very, very alive. We talked about Heaviest Dream. That is like a really fun sequence.
Oh my gosh, that sequence, my favorite in the movie.
Dark and and just that it's stylized differently. I think, I don't know, maybe it's just because it was so long, or maybe it's just the sense that after a while the plot does kind of just become like, oh, now he's got to like
another daughter,
justify his other daughter getting married. Yeah, it does kind of lose me. In the back half, I'm sorry to say, like I think it's like an incredibly competently, well, not just competently, like extremely well made movie in like almost every respect. But by the second half, I was like, okay, we know.
I'm not going to beat around the bush here. I found it an interesting failure. I was not super on board with this one. I love musicals. I found there not to be very much at stake in this movie, and that's where I struggled a little bit. And if you're gonna run 3 hours long, for me it has to be about more than the songs, some of which are really great. There were scenes in this I really loved, but I was like, there are moments in this I feel like they're kind of repetitive, and they're not really like pushing the story to a satisfying conclusion. And when we went to the intermission, I went, oh my god, we're at intermission. Like,
see, that's where we differ then, because I was like, up until that point, like, ooh, this is
so you fun. Were totally you were having a great time up until the intermission.
I really was. And it's interesting what you say about the stakes, because like in a sense the stakes are life or death. Like there's huge stakes for them, but it's not really like felt in the way it's kind of just, I don't know.
And some of that stuff works. It wasn't a movie I was like just bored the whole time. There are moments here and there that I think work really well. But it's like when there's the first daughter he's marrying off and that whole drama that I was into. But then it's like we get it again. We get it again with like two other daughters by the end of the movie. I'm like, can there be something else to kind of bring the plot a little bit more into motion? I don't know. There was just a lot of kind of downtime in this movie.
I thought by the time the third daughter is getting married to this guy that's not Jewish, it's like, you know, it is kind of this, it does feel like a similar crisis, but it is interesting that like that is the one where he really like draws the line up until like kind of the last minute, where, you know, he's able to like kind of like give in to these other marriages, but that is the one, you know, because this tradition, this line of like, well, you have to marry another Jew, that's where he's like, this is too far, like I can't accept this one. But but again, it doesn't really, I feel like it just doesn't hit as much as it should at that point in the musical. It just feels like we've already done this, we've seen this in different iterations. And I mean,
I mean, I know it's based on a stage show, but I'm like, why? Like, I want someone to explain to me why this story needs to take 3 hours. I just didn't quite, while it was going, I'm like, I don't understand why this can't go a little bit faster and have a little bit tighter script. I don't know. It just felt kind of like we have lots and lots of time to tell the story. Whereas you have Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, which came out earlier the same year, also a musical, and it tells a great story in about 95 minutes.
Right.
And so I'm just like, I don't,
I
just struggled with that a little bit. I don't know. I was watching this kind of perplexed why it was so huge and so popular.
That still feels like, you know, as much as I can see why this is like well made, and I again enjoyed especially the first half, that is still like the big question of this, and it's so wild. And I was curious to ask you about what you kind of spoke to, just like what is the context for movie musicals at this time? I do love like a movie musical, but I think there's a lot prior to just like the golden age of movie musicals I am not intimately familiar with, and then so I'm not really sure what historical context there was going into this in terms of like,
well, like 1970, the year before, we get two very long musicals. One is Darling Lily with Julie Andrews, and at the end of 1970, we talked about last year, absolutely wonderful movie I'd never seen, Scrooge, a musical adaptation of A Christmas Carol, starring Albert Finney. And I want to say that movie was like 2.5 hours long, and you did not feel a minute of it. It was so beautifully done. The songs are great. It ends with this musical number where the entire town starts just like dancing down the main street. And it is just such a lovely, lovely movie. And the movie flopped. Scrooge did not make a lot of money. It was a big flop. And
maybe
I'm like,
I haven't heard of it.
And it is wonderful. Just the costume design, the production design, Albert Finney's performance, I thought was well deserving of an Oscar nomination. He didn't get one. And I'm like, why does that movie flop? And then Fiddler, which I feel is a slower kind of lumbering musical, like, why is this the biggest hit of the year? Very interesting. I mean, I'm just thinking maybe people just were so familiar with Christmas Carol that they didn't want another adaptation.
Yeah.
Maybe that was part of it. And then Fiddler obviously probably had a lot of fans, people who had seen it on stage. I mean, it came out in November. I mean, maybe it was just that holiday period where there wasn't really. I mean, the other films we're talking about for November of 71 are two TV movies, Duel, Steven Spielberg's first movie, Duel, and Brian's Song, one of the most popular TV movies ever made.
Yeah.
November of 71 is pretty quiet theatrically. So I'm thinking maybe partly it's a landscape we don't really have these days, a landscape where there's just like one big movie that month. Maybe that was part of it.
Yeah, maybe so. And also like, I mean, right, trying to think of it like, you know, they are going to remake this movie. I would be shocked if the remake of Fiddler on the Roof doesn't come out in November of whatever year, because it's like that is
it would be an Oscar film. Yeah,
they're gonna make an awards play. This is just like this sort of like, I guess not for the whole family, but family oriented, like musical, big, you know, it just feels like that's exactly when it would come out. So to think then at the time, it wasn't the same sort of, it wasn't like it came out in November because they were like, we're gunning for this Oscar. Or, I mean, maybe it was, but it certainly seemed like with what else was coming out around then, it wasn't.
And the director of this, Norman Jewison, is really interesting because he directed, I don't know if you've seen In the Heat of the Night from 1967 with Rod Steiger and Sidney Poitier. It's such a fresh, like popping movie. Like there's so much energy in that film. It's so like innovative. And then the next year he makes The Thomas Crown Affair with Steve McQueen and Faye Dunaway. And that movie has a lot of great energy. And I found that I was kind of looking for the director of those movies. in Fiddler. And like That's a little bit. And I found like watching Fiddler, I couldn't quite see any stamp that Norman Jewison was making on this movie. Like there wasn't something that he had brought to those previous, obviously very, very different movies. But there wasn't that kind of style here. It felt kind of like it could have been directed by almost anybody. Like there wasn't anything.
Yeah.
Did you find I mean, outside of maybe the dream scene, which is really cool.
Gosh,
that's what, totally. 5 minutes of the movie. There are scenes of people talking where I'm like, all right, Norman, let's speed this along a little bit. I don't know. But he would go on to make another musical. His next movie after this was a musical, Jesus Christ Superstar, in 1973, which is about 100 minutes long.
Yeah.
So why does that movie get to be? Why does that movie get to be half this length? I want someone to tell me.
Jesus has nothing on Topol, that's for sure. That's really fascinating. I've never seen that one either, although I'm pretty familiar with a lot of the music from that one. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I do think from the films of his that I have seen, and of course, like my mind immediately goes to Moonstruck. Speaking of Nicolas Cage,
great movie.
It's like
Nicolas Cage,
one of the all-time greats. I think that I don't know. He has a really generous and patient approach to character, and obviously, like Moonstruck is all about character, and I think that you do see that in this film. I mean, it could be argued that maybe he's a little too patient with this film in a lot of ways, but I don't know. I think that he's got a lot of affection for these people, and he does in most of his films that I've seen, and that does show here for me. So that's kind of where I see his imprint, because he's not like I think like visually he's not like a super stylish, like distinctively stylish director, right? Unless I'm
I mean, I was I was looking for directorial flourishes like visually or anything. Like there were things here and there. I noted 5 or 6 on my notes, like some beautiful shots here and there, but I found like the first half especially to be very dark. Like there wasn't a whole lot visually that I found very exciting. Like I love that opening shot of the Fiddler. If you're watching the one behind me, like there was some stuff that I really enjoyed, like that magic hour kind of photography. I think the location shooting is done pretty well, but there wasn't a lot visually, like especially during the musical numbers, there wasn't anything that I was like getting really excited about, like what he was doing visually. I mean, he had never made a musical on film before, so maybe he was kind of like learning, like finding his way while doing that. Because I know I can't imagine, God, just the stress of making like a visually exciting movie musical. It's got to be a lot of work. So,
and that comes back to the point that I remember hearing that he didn't, or reading that he specifically wanted Topol over Zero because Zero was kind of giving you this bigger Broadway theater performance. Where he thought Topol was going to be able to give you something a little more nuanced. And again, I think his performance is pretty great. I really like how he kind of navigates the darker, the heavier side of it with like the levity and the humor and everything. And I don't know, I was really charmed by him. I was like, man, what I know, as you said, he played that show. I mean, he's played in the show for years and years and years on Broadway after the fact. But I'm like, was he ever in other movies? And did he ever look any like his actual age, or did he always look a lot older?
I would say besides the songs, like his performances makes this worthwhile, makes it like helps get me to the end. Like I found him really engaging and charming, as you say, like a Seth Rogen could maybe pull that off, like having that serious side and the comedic side, but always feeling like a real person, especially when he breaks the fourth wall in this movie. He talks to us, which is unusual. You don't see that in every movie. And he's singing and he's having serious and slightly more comedic scenes throughout the movie with different characters. And I love, one of my favorite scenes besides the dream scene was that scene later on with his wife, where they've been married 25 years and they have that just moment of just like talking about their relationship and their love for each other. That I thought was great. Like I really love that scene.
I like that too. Yeah, again, I've been stumping for the first half of this, but I think that is in the second half. And I was like, this is really, really special.
Yeah. And I don't want our listeners to think I don't like slow movies. Slow movies are totally fine. One of my 10 favorite movies is Before Sunset, which is just Julie Delpy and Ethan Hawke walking and talking for 90 minutes.
Oh God, perfect.
And it's like one of my favorite films. I do think it's a perfect film. So it's not to say that I needed the movie to have like, I didn't want it to go as fast as like Hairspray. Like I didn't need that.
Sure.
From 2007. I didn't, which is a great movie, but if Fiddler had had the same pace of Hairspray, that would have been weird. But I just feel like it's a little slow.
Fair. What came to mind for me when watching this was Funny Girl, which I think is pretty great, but I remember seeing it within the last 5-7 years maybe in a theater. It was like a repertory screening.
Ooh, cool.
And I remember, you get your intermission basically with that too. The first half up through when she sings "Don't Rain on My Parade," I was ready to be like, this is the best movie of all time. I thought it was
when she's belting that last line on the boat, that is just iconic. So
but
good.
I felt like the second half kind of shifts perspectives a little bit. It is a little bit more of a downer, and I felt the same way kind of with this too. And again, I'm wondering, I was like, was this just kind of the general structure for how a lot of the musicals were back then? It felt like an interesting parallel.
I have found that for the most part, when I watch even like the best of the best classic movie musicals, like when they're 3 hours long, I find that the first half is usually better. Like it's when they come back after, and usually the last scene will be pretty good, but like sometimes there's that filler right after intermission. It's almost like they know that people are still coming back from the bathroom.
Yeah, right. Give them some time.
I don't know. But yeah, I agree. I think that's the case sometimes. Like you have to start with something really great to like get everyone's attention, and then usually you're introduce all the characters, and like that part works pretty well. But then as we get to like hour 3, it's like they know they've got you.
Yeah, right. I'm not going anywhere now.
But yeah, I mean, I liked his performance in this. Like the daughter stuff, like I was like, some of this I'd rather see from like the daughter's point of view. Like I'd almost rather have like a segment of the movie like where we're just with her, and like
that's
her,
interesting. Yeah.
Like that's, I mean, that is high stakes, right? She's gonna be married off to this old guy, and she's in love with a much younger man. Like that part of the movie is really interesting, and I was into it. But some of that stuff is kind of from Topol's point of view, and I kind of wanted to stay more with her and kind of see how she's dealing with that. I don't know. But wow. Did you know that guy? I can't remember which daughter it was, but one of those guys was Starsky from Starsky and Hutch.
Oh God, that's right.
The classic TV show. The only actor in this movie I recognize.
He did look familiar.
Not to say I actually recognize him from Something's Gotta Give.
Oh my God, funny.
Much older. I was like, that guy's in Something's Gotta Give. Who is that? And I looked him up on IMDb, and he was Starsky from Starsky and Hutch.
That's funny.
Much later, right? A few years later. So anything else we haven't touched on, Cameron? Like, what do you think Norman Jewison brought to this movie as the director? I mean, we've touched on some of that before, but anything else that he did, like visually or with the pace or the actors' performances? What do you think Norman Jewison brought to this?
Yeah, I mean, as I mentioned, I think that he is like a filmmaker that I think of as being very generous with his cast. Right. Like, I think that he's a director that seems to be great with actors. I think he brings out pretty, natural performances out of everyone. I again, Topol is fantastic and so charming, but like, everybody has some great moments here and there. I'm totally blanking on her name, but the town matchmaker. Yeah, so I think on that level, it's great. And, you talked about some of the general like exteriors, and I think he makes this feel like a very, very real place. That credit is not all to him, but it feels pretty seamless to me, knowing that there were some shot outside, actually, like in Yugoslavia, which is now Croatia, I believe, right? Right. And then there being like soundstage, Pinewood Studios sets and everything. I feel like it's pretty seamless on that front. It feels like a very real, like it would seem to me almost like they fully, which they did in a lot of senses, but they fully built a village and then just like filmed it all right there. That's how it feels. Yeah,
when I saw that it was shot at Pinewood, part of the movie was shot at Pinewood Studios, that was surprised to me. I thought this felt kind of like they went somewhere like a real place and shot most of this. Like that was kind of news to me, because it does feel real, like a real place. And I thought that they captured that really well. And yeah, he's a great actor's director. He also directed The Hurricane. Great performance by Denzel Washington in that movie.
Yeah.
Oscar-nominated performance in that movie. He is still with us. He is in his late 90s, Norman Jewison. He's still with us, which I just love. God. I just love that. Like, we just recently celebrated the 96th birthday of Angela Lansbury, who's still with us. And I get to talk about her in December when we get to Bed Knobs and Broomsticks, which came out in December of 71.
Classic.
Another great
musical,
kind of a musical from the end. But why is Bedknobs? Why did that not do as well as Fiddler?
Okay, that one they were probably aiming for a younger audience for sure, right? They're like, kids cannot handle 3 hours.
When Angela's swimming with the fishes, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I just think that's fantastic that he's still with us. He's still commenting on this movie and all the great films he's made over, gosh, going back to the 60s, maybe even the 50s. I mean, this guy's been around a long time. It's really cool. Any other performances you wanted to touch on besides Topol? I mean, the best supporting actor that got a nomination. I mean, there are some other actors in this film that brought a lot of merit to this project, but it's like a big ensemble cast, right? There's a lot of people in this.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, to see that there was that supporting actor nomination for Leonard Frey, who was vocal, was interesting to me because I think he's good in his scenes and he kind of gets one song, but I feel like the last we don't really see a ton of him. He gets his sewing machine and everyone's excited, but there's not like a whole lot more. I was like, I don't know who else supporting actor specifically wise. I don't know who else you'd single out if you wanted to, but I thought that Norma Crane, who played Golda, his wife, was pretty great. I mean, again, we both like that. Well, she's involved in 2 of our favorite scenes. The one where they sing about how they love each other, and then she's there in the nightmare too, kind of like a gas that the lie he's spinning.
That's a good point.
I think she's pretty good for being someone that I'm not really familiar with her work. I'll have to admit, but.
Do you find that exciting when you watch a movie and you don't really know anybody in it? Do you find that exciting?
Yeah, absolutely. Because it's just as like for someone like myself and yourself, as we're definitely film fans, and it's just so wild to be wowed by somebody brand new and be like, well, how many blind spots do I have? But then also like maybe there's something that you have seen where you just like didn't really know who she was, so it just didn't click at the time.
Yeah,
but.
That's something I'm really happy that Norman Jewison, he could have been pressured into hiring like name actors for this, and that would have felt wrong if it had been like people that we recognize, big stars from the early 70s. I don't know if this movie would have done as well. I don't think people would have responded to that. I think we needed actors who weren't as well known, right, for this to work.
Yeah, absolutely. And that probably is what, even 50 years later, it helped me watch it and feel like this feels like a very authentic thing in my mind, because I wasn't sitting there watching like, I don't know, why is Paul Newman coming to mind? It wasn't like I was watching Paul Newman in a beard and his little hat, like I would have been like, well, one, that man is far too sexy. I can't think of anything else right now. But we're talking about Paul Newman later in November. He directed a film called Sometimes a Great Notion with Henry Fonda and Lee Remick, and we're talking about him. I've already recorded the episode, and he is one handsome man. Watching this movie, I'm like, it almost must have been hard for him in a way, because he is so attractive. When he's just playing an average Joe, it's like you have to kind of suspend your disbelief. Because even if this was a real person living in Oregon, where he is in the movie I watched, I'm like, women would just be throwing themselves. Paul Newman in the Topol role would not have been a great choice. He could pull it off, but it just wouldn't be the same movie. You're totally right. And that's what I think is so interesting, again, about this remake and just trying to think of this film in the modern context. It's like, do they go with, quote unquote, a star, which obviously Seth Rogen is. I think Michael Stuhlbarg is maybe the right kind of character actor that he could do this. Or maybe there's someone, I mean, God, I'm not as clued into Broadway actors, actors, just because I've never lived in New York and had those shows be accessible to me. So, I mean, maybe there is someone that is just like, I don't know, who's playing.
That would be cool. That would be cool. I mean, I feel like this is tough, right? Like, do you, in these days, if you have a property like Fiddler that most people at least know of, do you have to hire a known name actor for the lead? I don't know if you do. Like, I feel like this kind of a project, you could just find a really great Broadway actor. And people, I don't think people would avoid it because they don't know the star. I don't know if we're at that point.
And not to talk about James Corden again, but you see where, like, obviously The Prom is a fully different kind of musical, but you see the issue where you, like, do just cast for star power. People are upset about that and also don't really think he pulled off that performance anyway. So, that's...
Well, the Hollywood Foreign Press thought he pulled it off.
Oh God, right. Which, speaking of, this movie did win Globes back in the day.
It must have,
as far as I know. Yeah, I'm so anyway, but God,
yeah,
we don't need to talk about HFPA or James Corden.
But I would be interested, going to the last question, like how would they make this now? Like I would be interested to see what they would change and what they would keep the same. I mean, I think a lot of these core songs you would have to keep the same. That it's funny. I have been a huge fan of Mrs. Doubtfire my whole life, and that scene at the when Harvey Fierstein is giving Robin Williams different looks, and they do that matchmaker. I didn't know that was Fiddler on the Roof until this week. I was like, oh, that's what that's from.
Yeah, me neither. That was the same. I had the exact same reaction.
I wrote in big letters, Mrs. Doubtfire. I've going on almost 30 years. I did not know that song they sing in Mrs. Doubtfire was from this movie. There was the other one. Yeah, go ahead.
Harvey's played Teviot before, so.
Oh, really? Oh, that's great casting. I love that idea. Do you know when he did that on stage? Like,
no, and I'm wondering what the timeline would have been. Was that like an in joke then in Mrs. Doubtfire? Because it's like, well, Harvey, everyone knows Harvey's played I keep saying Teviot.
Tevye. Yeah, I know that Harvey Fierstein obviously was Edna in Hairspray. I didn't know that if he had ever done Tevye, but I feel like he could have been good for that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I love Harvey.
Harvey Fierstein could just play anything, and I would watch it. He's so great. And the other one was Sunrise, Sunset. I couldn't place it. I know I've heard that song in another movie somewhere. Like, I'm like, that I know that song.
That was another one that really stood out to me.
I'm like, is it a joke? Is it in a comedy where like an actor goes sunrise, sunset? I mean, I know I've heard that somewhere, and I couldn't place it. I could place Mrs. Doubtfire.
I'm gonna connect this. This is not on that topic, but while we're talking of like songs that we had heard before, I'm gonna connect the film podcast Cinematic Universe. I don't know if you're familiar with this. Had Oscar buzz. That the podcast that Chris Feil and Joe Reed, two writers, they do this podcast about movies over the years that had Oscar buzz and then ended up not getting any nominations.
Oh, that's a cool topic. Yeah,
it's a great podcast. Definitely got to recommend this. I'll plug that. I was a guest at one point in time. I talked about Hairspray, but they did an episode on rendition, and anytime they would say rendition, they would edit in the bump, 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 bump from the tradition song at the beginning of this. And I was laughing. I thought it was like hysterical, but I really still didn't have the context for what they were pulling from until now. So kind of funny.
So it didn't have to be a movie that was praised and everyone liked, and then it just, for whatever reason, ended up not being nominated. It can be a movie like Rendition, where on day one, it just fell flat.
For sure. And I think they're pretty forward with the fact that it's like, it's kind of ultimately to their discretion, like what they consider something having buzz, but they're like
before
so many
it comes
of us
out.
Totally. And they're like so many of us longtime readers of like Entertainment Weekly and that sort of thing, where things would have like the who gets the Oscar season cover, it's they've been pretty steeped in it for a while, so I think they just kind of
like in September of 2007, when Entertainment Weekly Fall Movie Preview says big Oscar buzz, Rendition, Reese Witherspoon is back in a dramatic role, Meryl Streep, and then the movie just unwatchable. I understand that. I'm really intrigued by movies that come out like in November, December, and they're really good, and then they just don't get nominated for anything, whether it's a small film.
Yeah.
Like Never, Rarely, Sometimes, Always. Did you see that movie last year?
Oh my God.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Like that was in my top 3. I just thought it was so brilliant. And
that movie is
nominated for anything outside of like the Independent Spirit Awards and some Critics Awards. I'm like, hello.
I know.
This movie is amazing.
It is weird. Like, what does it really take for a smaller movie like that to break through
and transcend?
Yeah. And I don't know. It's just like that movie maybe never felt like a big enough thing. Like it made a big enough of a splash, even though it was like praised almost across the board. But it's pretty interesting to think about.
Or Toni Collette in Hereditary, which I will like just praise till the end of time.
Yeah. Love Miss Toni.
People watch that movie and they said, she was okay.
No, she was.
That performance
brilliant.
deserved to win, let alone be nominated. Like, come on. If Kathy Bates can win for Misery, I think Toni Collette deserved to at least be nominated.
Agreed.
All right. Anything else about Fiddler on the Roof? What do we love about that nightmare scene? I just thought that was so like an interesting. It's like the only real bit of huge stylization in all 3 hours. It's just like a really cool scene. And on the Blu-ray, I watched it. They have the scene in full color, not saturated like they put for the movie. They have it on the Blu-ray. You can watch it the way they shot it, which is in full color, and it looks gorgeous. Looks amazing. But they wanted it to have that kind of nightmarish, like saturated quality. So I understand why they did it. But why do we love that scene? What does that scene bring to the movie?
It is there's just so much going on. Like there is this like comedic undercurrent of it, you know, because he's lying and we know he's lying. So we're like in on the joke.
Dream. Yeah.
And so he's just making this up that this woman like Laser Wolf's dead, you know, his wife that passed, like that she comes back as this like scary witch from beyond the grave and is gonna curse their it's so I don't know. I that is what really stands out to me. It's just kind of the comedic undercurrent that it's just is like, how could he possibly spin this to get his wife to convince his wife that his daughter should marry Mosul. And I think that detail of it is funny, but then stylistically it's beautiful. There is kind of like a sense of, it is kind of scary in a way too, because it just feels like, whoa, anything can happen right now. So there's my jumbled thoughts on it.
There's just like an eeriness to it that you don't really get anywhere else in the movie. It is very much, it's like a standalone moment that doesn't really have any comparison anywhere else in the movie. And it's just like I'm assuming that is in the stage version, right? And that like all the actors get dressed up for that and they have like special effects and stuff. And whereas most of the show I feel like can be done fairly with a limited budget, like in terms of there's a lot of scenes of them just talking and stuff.
And
I feel like that's the scene that you need like a big production number for. And I thought they pulled it off just so well in the movie. That's a really great scene. Anything else with Fiddler we haven't touched on? That any other scenes or moments you wanted to? Feel like I've kind of touched on all the main notes I wrote down. Anything else you wanted to say about it?
I think I wrote all my notes down too. We talked a lot about Norman Jewison, and I it's like pretty easy to find fact. Like I think it's even right there on like the Wikipedia page that like the studio hired him because they thought he was Jewish because of his last name, but he is not in fact Jewish. Which I was just like, wow. All right.
Yeah, I watched. There's a little bit on the Blu-ray where he talked about that, and he said, "I'd like to do this movie, but I want you guys just to know something." And they were like, "What?" He's like, "I'm not Jewish," and they were just in shock. They were like, "Your last name's Jewison."
How they're like, how this doesn't compute. I can't. Very, very funny detail.
That was funny, but they still gave him the job. He still was the chosen one, and he got a Best Director nomination. One of many, and just a fantastic director. I'm excited to see more of his work in the 70s. I know his next one is a musical, Jesus Christ Superstar, but I think he has some more just like dramas after this, and curious to see. I love directors like this guy who is able to bounce around in different kinds of genres and stuff.
I was gonna say,
I love auteurs. I love directors who just make the same kind of thing, but the ones I really respond to are the ones that are capable and are interested and have the opportunity to do different kinds of things. I mean, we've talked about like Wes Craven on here before, and some of these directors who get just pushed into a genre.
Right.
They want to do anything else, but nobody gives them the opportunity. That has been a thing for some directors.
Yeah.
But then you have like a Norman Jewison who's able to make a film like In the Heat of the Night, and then to make a movie like Fiddler on the Roof, two very different kinds of movies. And that's really cool too. Yeah. All right. So that takes us to our final two segments. The first one is called the Divine Double Feature. This is where we talk about a more modern film that we would pair with this. I don't know. There's many listeners who would want to put on a second movie after the 3-hour-long Fiddler on the Roof. But if there was a film, let's say they watched it the next day or something that was kind of like paired with it in some way, something that has a similar tone or genre, like what did you go with that?
Well, I kind of hinted at this earlier, and I almost feel like it's a cheat because I think that there's like every intention that this movie does echo Fiddler on the Roof in some way, but I would say A Serious Man from the Coen brothers, starring Michael Stuhlbarg.
So good. That's such a great movie. I haven't seen it. I saw it the one time in theaters. I loved it.
Yeah, it's really, really great. And I think there's a number of reasons why I would say it works. I mean, obviously from a very like broad point of both of what these movies do, it's like you're focused on this family man, this Jewish family man who's like trying to figure out how to live like a life that adheres to these like traditions of his faith, be devout, but this world around him is changing in so many ways. And in a lot of ways, it feels like this world that he knows is kind of falling apart around him. Both the movies do that. Both the movies balance kind of this like heavier, darker subject matter with a lot of humor. I mean, obviously the Coen brothers, it's extremely dry. And then there's the fact that the poster, that the main image of a serious man is Michael Stuhlbarg's character standing on a roof.
That's right. Holy, I didn't even put that together. That's great.
I mean, you could say, yeah, he's up there. I know it's a scene too where he's up there like trying to fix the antenna. He's fiddling with the antenna.
Fiddling with
on
the antenna.
Roof. It's just.
Was there any intention by the directors to like pay homage at all to Fiddler?
I wish I could tell you. I'm so curious now. You know, having just kind of finished watching this yesterday, I'm like, yeah, I kind of want to read up on it more, but I specifically want to read up on that and see if they mention it at any point in time. Because to me, it feels pretty obvious that that's kind of what they were going for. They wanted to do it. And if you remember, A Serious Man also starts with that really interesting like prologue that almost is like a short film unto itself that is set in this. Oh gosh, I'm forgetting the term. Shtetl, like that was the name for the villages that they lived in and that these Jewish communities lived in. And, you know, much like this movie is set one of those. So I think that they had every intention to draw some lines between the two.
That's a great choice. I love that movie. I remember I was so excited when it got a Best Picture nomination. It was I did not expect that to happen. It was kind of a smaller movie.
Correct me if I'm wrong, was that the first year they expanded the field? And I was like, this is why we do that, because then we get these great movies in there.
I loved in 2009 and 2010 when we got 10 nominees and they were all different genres, animation, science fiction. I loved that. I loved having a mix of different films like that. And I've ever since we've had like these like nine nominees or 8 nominees. But I don't know, there was something about those 2 years where there was like a really interesting collection of films. And it's, you know, going back to 2008 when everyone expected The Dark Knight to get nominated and it didn't.
Yeah.
I think that's what kind of steamrolled, you know, like let's, you know, pump it up to 10 nominations. And like A Serious Man is a great example of a movie that would not have been nominated, I think, if there had been 5, right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't have made the list.
The diversity of styles and genres that we got that year. I mean, this is the year where it basically came down to Avatar and The Hurt Locker, which is wild. But then, to think that this movie was in that and Up, like, you know,
District 9. District 9 got a nomination for Best Picture.
Yeah.
Precious? Yeah.
This was you're right. Oh, and then, I mean, Inglourious Basterds were maybe one of my favorite of the bunch too. Like, this was like a really fun selection.
And The Blind Side.
Okay, I intentionally did not bring that one up because I'm trying to pretend it didn't happen. But you know, love Sandra Bullock.
Oh, I'm a Sandra Bullock super fan. Yeah, I don't know if it deserved Best Picture.
No.
I did like her performance in that, but yeah. So and what a run that was for the Coen brothers too. I mean, No Country for Old Men is just an extraordinary film, and then for them to follow it up just very quickly with Burn After Reading, A Serious Man, True Grit. And then there was a little window, and then they did Inside Llewellyn Davis, which was also just an astonishing film. What a run they had those few years! Like really, really interesting, different kinds of movies. Really cool, like different genres and stuff.
Some comedy, of my favorite,
Western, and
those guys.
Those guys are fantastic. So I was like, after when this was over, I'm like, I want a fun movie musical that I can just like dance around to. Also about marriage. Also in an international location, so I went with Mamma Mia.
Oh my gosh! Well, perfect.
which is just a whole different kind of movie musical. But I've maybe watched Mamma Mia more than like any other modern movie musical. Like that movie is on. I watch the rest. I don't know about you.
Of course.
I love Meryl Streep in that movie. What a year she had to be in Mamma Mia and Doubt in the same year. I mean, just two polar opposite extraudinary performances. Really,
I always forget
really
about
great.
that. Yeah.
If Kate Winslet had not been in The Reader, I don't know if Meryl would have lost that year for Doubt, because she is so good in Doubt. And the fact that she had Mamma Mia the same year, it's just such, I mean, it shows the range of what she can do in just those two movies. And it's not a perfect film. It's got flaws in it. Pierce Brosnan singing is questionable, but it's a lot of fun.
I love that.
And I feel like after Fiddler, which is kind of slower, like I feel like I'd want to put on another musical that kind of shows the evolution of the movie musical, like in terms of pacing and things. Like I don't think you could tell a story like Fiddler with the same pacing in 2008. Like I think like times have changed over the decades. And not to say that's a good or a bad thing. I mean, sometimes I watch movies now and I'm like, slow it down. Like I say that about a lot of movies now. Like I'm like, can we just like
absolutely
take a breather? Like Rise of Skywalker was a good example, right? The latest Star Wars movie where it was just like they've got like 4 hours of plot to get through in 2 hours, and you're just like, I'm like, whoa, movie, slow down.
I know, slow it down, but at the same time, it's already so long. It's like, God.
But so it kind of just depends movie to movie. But I think Mamma Mia has a very kind of fast pace. I mean, there's some songs where they quiet down and when like mother and daughter are singing together and stuff, but just has a much faster kind of pacing to it. And I just think that would be an interesting comparison with Fiddler. And it's also very much about marriage and marrying off your child and all of that. So it has some thematic elements there too. So I would go with Mamma Mia. I haven't seen it in a couple years, but that's one. I liked the sequel. It was okay. I liked it, but I really love the original from 2008. That's a great movie.
Undeniable.
So that takes us into the movie musical, our final segment, Beyond the Flick. Like if you had to pick your three favorite movie musicals of all time, like what would you go with? If you only take three to a desert island. Can't do anything else.
Oh God, that's so sad to think about. So this was really, really, really tough because there have been so many great ones over the years. And again, I think I have a lot of blind spots within the genre too, even though it's one I quite like. But honestly, one of my favorite movies of all time, so I couldn't not put it on this list, is Cabaret. I think Cabaret is perfect, and it's another one that really, I mean, God, that movie obviously gets so dark, and that's a huge part of the point of it. But that movie is undeniable. Not to use that word again, but that movie is just undeniable. I mean, the music, the dancing, just from a showmanship level purely, but then just that story is wonderful. And man, Liza,
extraordinary. Do you know when that movie came out?
Is it 72, 3, 4?
Came out in February of 1972.
Oh my gosh! So you're gonna maybe cover.
So we're talking about that one soon.
Wow! Well, that's gonna be
like my first month of the 72 films. The two big films of 72 are Cabaret and The Godfather. And they both came out at the very beginning of the year.
Wow.
So I don't even get like some downtime in the spring to talk about some smaller films. It's like we go right into the 1972 season with like the two biggest movies of the year.
What was it, like one of the highest grossing of that year?
I want to say Cabaret. I want to say it's in the top 10. I don't know if it was in the top 5, but I think it did really well. And I watched that movie. I remember I took a creative writing class in high school. And it was like fiction, poetry, and film. We'd kind of alternate. And he showed us Cabaret, and I just fell in love. Like, it was so great. And I haven't seen it in a long time. I'm excited to watch it again.
Yeah, that movie is really great. And I think it's quite a bit longer, too.
Is that movie 3 hours long?
No, it's at least 2 hours, but maybe not by much. But anyway, that just kind of moves.
I'm okay. As Roger Ebert said, right? A good movie is never long enough, and a bad movie is never short.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Like if I'm engaged, like Mare of Easttown, not a movie but a show. Like, I mean, some people were like, this could have been a movie. I like how the 7 hours gives breath to the characters, and we really get to know everybody. This town, I loved that about it. I like sometimes when we get that time to spend.
100% agree.
So if Cabaret were 3 hours and Fiddler was 2. The world would be a better place.
Yeah, right.
All right, so what other ones?
So my second pick, and I wasn't intentionally, I don't necessarily think of myself as like a Fosse head. I'm not like a diehard Bob Fosse fan, but Chicago to me
Yeah.
is, in my mind, the gold standard of the movie musical of this century, like the modern movie musical. I think
Great
it
film.
is. Yeah, that movie is just electric, and that is a movie that moves, that does not stop
That
moving.
moves.
I think
like a train.
Yep. And I just the way that they adapted it and made a lot of these a lot of the big musical numbers into these fantasy sequences within the film, but they still make it all feel like part of a whole is really brilliant. What a cast too. Like, obviously just Catherine Zeta-Jones, like the perfect use for her. And I hope that one day we give her another role worthy of what she can bring to a
that's been tough. She is so great in that movie. She's great in a lot of the films from that era. And then lately, you know, she pops up on a TV series here and there. And I'm like, this woman is a phenomenal actress. Like, let's give her a role worthy of her. You know, like, can we 100%. Find something?
You know? Please. Yeah, I saw that she's going to play Morticia in the like Addams Family Netflix series that is like
animated, right?
Going up.
Is it animated? Oh, it's not animated.
Is live action, yeah.
Oh, cool.
Okay. Tim Burton's directing
live action.
So yeah.
Oh, that's something.
At least
so
it could be good. And I think she is a great choice for it. Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm excited to see her in that. But yeah, she's incredible in Chicago, and of course Renee Zellweger is.
She was so good.
Incredible.
That was tough. I remember I was kind of rooting for Renee Zellweger to win for Chicago over Nicole Kidman in The Hours, just because Nicole Kidman is great in The Hours, but she's only in like 25 minutes of the whole movie. And I feel like, as great as Catherine Zeta-Jones is, like, I think that like Chicago rests on Renee Zellweger's shoulders, and she is just like dynamite in that movie. She would win the next year for Cold Mountain. It was almost like okay, here's your award for Chicago. But
yeah, I was like, oops. Yeah.
And Richard Gere, one of the most famous actors to never get an Oscar nomination his whole career, he won the Golden Globe for Chicago. That was the best chance he was ever going to have to get an actor nomination. But the male lead performances of 2002 were so great. That was a tough year to get into the running.
Those.
It was Jack Nicholson for About Schmidt.
Oh God, yeah.
Daniel Day-Lewis for Gangs of New York. Nicolas Cage. Yeah.
Yep.
Nicolas Cage for Adaptation. Maybe my favorite Nicolas Cage performance is an Adaptation. He's just like on another level in that movie. And then Michael Caine for The Quiet American. And the winner was Adrian Brody for The Pianist. I mean, just 5 fantastic performances. It's hard to get in some years when you have that many great performances. Totally. But then you get like a year like where Julianne Moore wins for Still Alice, where it's like, she had no competition. Yeah. I'm like, why couldn't Glenn Close should have been nominated for The Wife in a year where there was no competition? Then she would have won.
God. Poor Glenn.
You know?
And Olivia Colman came in.
But when you're up against Olivia Colman in The Favorite, who was so great, it's hard.
Impeccable. She's phenomenal.
But that's another conversation. I really hope Glenn Close wins. I mean, it's like, come on, guys, 8 nominations. Come on, let's give her. Like, if she takes a breath, give her the award.
Exactly.
On film, just give her the Oscar. She's been so great in so many movies, going back almost about 40 years now. Glenn Close, one of these years. Come on. All right. Do you have a final film?
Oh, yeah. I laughed when you were telling me about your double feature, because my last pick, my wild card pick is Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again.
Oh,
the sequel.
The sequel. Okay, so why the sequel over the first one?
Because they're both such fun, joyful films.
Right.
The music is great because it's ABBA. How could it not be? There's something about the sequel that is just, leans into the camp of it in a way, leans into the fantasy. The fact that the sequel ends with the cast from, the flashbacks and the present timeline singing Super Trooper together.
Oh, I love the ending. It's so great.
I mean, honestly, that is what does it for me. It's truly like so charming. But I think that it does balance the stories well in a way I didn't really anticipate. I don't know. I mean, it's just like a goofy, campy movie. And not unlike Chicago, has, a great turn from Christine Baranski, and I can't say no to that.
Christine Baranski, man, I finally watched The Good Wife, which is such a great show, and then onto The Good Fight, and just being able to just relish in the amazingness that is Christine Baranski these last few years on television. And then so whenever she pops up in something, and she brought so much to both of those Mamma Mia movies. She's so much fun in those. Really, she's great musical number she has in the first one, and and then the Angel Eyes number in the sequel is a lot of fun.
And a quick shout out to I believe her name is Jessica Keenan Wynn, who plays the younger Christine Baranski. Well, Christine Baranski's character, who does like a fantastic job of kind of giving you the essence of Christine, but like, not doing like a straight up impression.
Did you buy that she just had the same hairstyle from when she was like in the womb?
Well, when it works, it works. You just leave. Yeah. But there's a really interesting, I was kind of thinking about those because there's so many other movie musicals I love. I love Hairspray, again, as we've talked about.
So it's so great. That's it's not in my top 3. It's in it'd be like 4 or 5. It's really high up there. I love Hairspray from 07. That's so much fun.
But I think all 3 of these are kind of on this really interesting continuum of like the movie musical as like fantasy escapism, because you do have Mamma Mia, Here We Go Again, which is purely that. You have Chicago in the middle, which is like, within the story, they're leaning into these fantastical music numbers. And then there's Cabaret, which is like much more realistic, but there's the stage show going on, and they're putting on this show as like a bit of escapism, as like a bit of a fantasy in this really, really dark time. Yeah. And only just in like looking at the 3 of those together, I was like, there's an interesting programmed thing there too, I think, just with what the musical represents. And
the musical could be more than one thing. It can be different genres. It can be funnier and serious. And I mean, so many great filmmakers have done Dancer in the Dark. I mean, there's like so many different kinds of musicals that one can make. It's not just one thing. That's what I love about musicals when they're done well. So yeah, my runners up, I mean, you mentioned a lot of them. Obviously, Singing in the Rain from 1952 is like a classic film. I didn't see it until I got to college. I took an American film history class and we watched it, and it was just like, I just got to see it on a big screen. It was so great. Umbrellas of Cherbourg. Have you seen that from 1964?
Unfortunately, have not.
You need to see it. It is one of the most strikingly gorgeous musicals, and very much influenced Damien Chazelle in La La Land. Like that's like, I think it's his favorite movie. So a lot of like thematic like ties to Umbrellas of Cherbourg from La La Land, another one of my favorite musicals of recent years. I also had Chicago and Hairspray. Those are like the big ones.
Yeah.
So my favorites would be Mary Poppins, is just a childhood classic. I mean, it's a lot more than a musical. There are lots of segments in the movie where they're not singing, but the songs in it are so great. And I love Julie Andrews and Dick Van Dyke together. And it's one of my favorite Disney movies. Just always brings a smile to my face, Mary Poppins. My second favorite would be Little Shop of Horrors. Have we seen Little Shop of Horror?
God, yes.
Which they've been talking about doing a remake recently, right? Like Chris Evans playing the dentist, and Scarlett Johansson, I want to say, playing Audrey.
I remember, and Billy Porter's supposed to be
the voice of the plant. And I want to say, was it Taron Egerton, I want to say, for Seymour.
Oh.
He was way too handsome to play Seymour.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. But I will watch him in anything. So
was that 2 years? I feel like it was before the pandemic. They announced that cast and that it was it was in development. And then I feel like I haven't heard anything about that.
There's this thing. There was a random award show. I think it was like the last time they did the MTV Movie and TV Awards. They gave Scarlett Johansson like their generation award, whatever that means. Billy Porter was the one to present it. And I was like, why would they have Billy Porter do this for Scarlett Johansson? And then I remembered that they were supposed to be in that together. So
okay. I don't think they didn't shoot it. I don't think they shot it.
No, I don't think so. But that makes me think that like there is something still in the works there. So
it's one of those just fantastic properties that whether it's that cast or someone else, I would be surprised in the next 10 years if they don't do another version. Because I feel like there are younger generations who might not be aware of the 80s movie. Alan, I mean, just the score of that movie, Howard Ashman, Alan Menken, like the work they did on that film, and the cast, and Steve Martin as the dentist is just comedy gold. Like it's just like amazing. I showed that film to some of my students last year. None of them had seen it, and they all really loved it. And it still holds up. Like, it's a lot of fun. It's very dark, very funny, and I love every song in that movie. Is fantastic. Yes, I love the songs, right? And I mean, even the song that they had to cut later, where the plant actually ate Seymour and Audrey, and then the plant took over the world. The infamous alternate ending, also a great song. If you can find it on YouTube, they're really good. But the finished film, there's nothing like it. I just love that movie.
Yeah, it's
and
perfect.
My favorite. I mean, it doesn't have a ton of songs in it, but it still is Willy Wonka the Chocolate Factory from the summer of 1971. We did an episode on that last summer. I got to talk to Veruca Salt herself from England. Zoomed in with me. I talked to her for an hour. Julie Don Cole, who played Veruca Salt in the 1971 original, was a surreal hour that I still can't believe happened. And it's still one of my 10 favorite films. And I love the songs. I love the style. I love the dark humor. Gene Wilder is perfection in that movie. Totally. Never gets old. I love Willy Wonka. Have you seen that one? Have you seen that one in a while, Willy Wonka, the original?
It has been a few years, but like that was one that was just on constant rotation for a while there when I was younger. I loved it. Like even the parts that it's like, oh, this is kind of scary, but like I was just so enchanted by its ability to just like, just be so many different things, scary and funny and charming and
weird and like
weird,
experimental. Like, oh, we're gonna have the Oompa Loompa sing and we're gonna put their text on the screen. Like just weird choices that all work. That I just think is really creative and different.
Yeah. Now I have to ask you real quick. Have you seen that little clip that was going around Twitter of Timothée Chalamet singing?
Oh no, I saw the picture that he shared of him in costume.
Yes.
There was a clip of him singing.
There's someone, wherever they're shooting, there's someone that lives there who just posted a video on Twitter from kind of far away. And it's clear that like whatever you're seeing in the shot, it's like he's on top of this car that's moving and he's singing. They clearly have the track of the song playing, but it's actually Timothée Chalamet's voice.
Okay, so he's like they already recorded his voice and he's just like lip syncing to it.
I assume because it's kind of far away, but you can tell it's him on top of this vehicle that's moving. And it's just so strange. I don't know. It became this kind of flashpoint on Twitter the other day.
No, I missed that. Yeah.
It was referenced in an SNL sketch just from, when we were recording last night's episode, which is interesting. They had Bowen Yang playing an Oompa Loompa and they kind of talk about Willy Wonka, Twonka, as they call him.
Twonka!
Yeah.
Anyway,
not to derail things, but I'll have to send you that clip because it's something.
I am very interested in not so much in a prequel to Willy Wonka, but in Timothée Chalamet as a great actor, and he's an interesting choice to play a young Wonka. So I'm interested if they can pull together a really good story, like. It'll be better than the Tim Burton film. That's all I got.
I mean, God, I freaking hope so. That was a nightmare. That actually is a nightmare.
Julie Don Cole, Veruca Salt herself, was like, yeah, that movie wasn't so great.
Ooh, I love that.
I'm like, tell it like it is, Julie.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that takes us to the end here. Cameron, thanks so much for being my guest today for Fiddler on the Roof. I would love for you to tell our listeners where they can find you online, if you have anything you'd like to promote.
Yeah, I mean, you can find me online on Twitter and Instagram at my name, Cameron, at Cameron Scheetz. That's Scheetz.
Nice.
Yeah, just always feel like I should spell that just because, But I don't think anything specific to like plug, but I always have various pieces and interviews coming out on a pretty regular basis, and I always share them on there. And obviously, they're on the AV Club, so you can check it out there. But yeah, that's me.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for being here today. Thanks to all of you for listening. You can find us online at filmat50.com. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And until next time, remember, 50 never looked this good.